The following interview is part of the USMC VTA History Project. The interview is being conducted at the USMC VTA reunion in Seattle, Washington on November 3rd, 2019. The interviewees are members of the VTA, and the completed interviews will be posted on the VTA website at www.usmcvta.org. The purpose of the interviews and the VTA History Project is to capture the experiences of our members and make them available for future generations. Gerry?
Yeah, I went into the Marine Corps in June of 1964. I got to Camp Pendleton probably in September, October of 1964. In March of I was in Bravo Company. Actually, then I was in Headquarters Company, 3rd Tanks in the Heavies. I got transferred to, actually I was still in that, in fact I was still in Charlie Company, and I heard that they were going to put together a group of people who were going to Okinawa with the intent to get over to Vietnam, and that was in March of 1965. I went to my platoon sergeant, Sergeant Stinky Davis, and said, "Sergeant, I want to go." And he said, "Don't worry, Hearne, you were the first one on the list." And I left. We went to Okinawa, and I was there in B Company first, and we stayed at Camp Hansen for approximately until August. And in August, we mounted out and went in country on Operation Starlight.
Okay.
Beaches of Chu Lai, Vietnam.
That was in 1965?
That was in 1965. It was August. We landed on August 18th, 1965 at 6:10 in the morning, sharp. And I was a gunner on a flame tank, the rear tank of 2, and then the fun began.
Wow. I know you made the beach landing.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. And do you want anything before that or after, or just start at the beach?
Whatever you want to share.
Well, came to Pendleton in the fall of '64 out of boot camp, out of ITR. Was in Charlie Company heavy tanks, 105s and 105s, and I was in that platoon. We did very little. We cleaned them up every day. We'd just go in there and clean them up because they were virtually inoperable. Mm-hmm. And I got there, I think probably November. I'm guessing by the time I got out of ITR, in fact, I'm pretty sure it was. I got out of ITR, showed up at First Tanks, Charlie Company. I had been there approximately 4 months or so. Past the time I should have gotten my PFC, didn't get it. Had another opportunity to get PFC, didn't get it again. But I was the guy who kept getting moved around. Whenever there's somebody new come in or somebody come from somewhere who was kind of a pain in the butt, I got moved to the bunk over or the bunk under that individual. And for those who would know Las Pulgas, immediately across the road from the Quonset huts, there was a big turnout out there surrounded by oak trees, oaks and and eucalyptus, and I'd end up over there and end up getting pat on the back, and the guys, we get the guy squared away and everything can be fine, but that happened regularly, and got a ticket hitchhiking up in LA one time to try and hunt down a girlfriend I'd met as a young boy, and so I worked hard to stay a private, and in February of '65, word come down that they were putting together a group. Bravo Company First Tanks was going to go over to Okinawa with the intent of ultimately getting to Vietnam. They're going on I forget the term for when but they were going to mount out, and I went to the platoon sergeant, Stinky Davis. I said, "Sergeant Davis, I'd like to be on that list." And he said, "Private Hearne, don't worry, you were the first one on the list." So That's fine, that was cool. I wasn't surprised by his comment. We floated over on a USS Alamo, went to Okinawa, hit at, help me with the beach there that you landed at on Okinawa. Anyway, I think it was the west end of the beach at Okinawa, west end Okinawa. Rolled up the road to Camp Hansen. As I think about it, I was still in, when I got there, I ended up in flame tanks. I'd never been in flame tanks. I'd been in the heavies, but I was in flame tanks once we got to Camp Hansen. And we were there from March to August. And I was in flame tanks and enjoyed the life in beautiful downtown Kin Village. And I was a little nervous when they were saying we're going to have that gal show up and look for the father of her son. That kind of made me a little anxious.
Everybody looked around.
Yeah, not that I'd ever done anything.
There are a lot of people sneaking toward the door.
Not that I'd done anything that my wife would be ashamed of while I was over there, but although I wasn't married to her then. But anyway, so we got word that they were going to mount out, go to Okinawa. It was actually what they did was they shut down Liberty. They shut down Liberty. We left on probably the 12th, maybe the 13th. So probably 4 or 5 days before that, we got a tight lockdown. And they went out and they put the fences back together out where we used to go in and go out and around the base there at Hansen. Put all that together. Then they started running security out there to make sure nobody was getting off base. For 5 days, we shot napalm. We shot napalm. We did a lot of practice. Then come to mount out. We went into the tank. We were outside the tank park, flame tanks, where we went inside the tank park, and they loaded us up with ammo. We got 2,000 rounds of 30 cal ammo, and we got probably. I don't know, we probably got a couple of boxes of 50 cal, and we got 19 rounds of 45 caliber ammo. And fortunately, I got all 19 of those, because I used them.
Wow.
I used them. So my suspicion has always been that there were a lot of Okinawans working on our bases, and my suspicion is if they were involved in everything that was done on that base, and if they were to see that these tanks are loading up, they're getting ammoed up, they're getting ready to go to war, I think they were concerned that there'd be a leak,
Yep.
and that somebody might know that somebody was coming.
Yep.
That's the only explanation for. None of us had hardly any ammo that was on that ship. We went on to the LST Whetstone County, floated down. We must have left before that, because I think we actually floated for 5 days, and it was kind of a slow casual float. And on the evening of must have been the 17th, February 17th, late afternoon, they called everybody down into the well deck and says, "Well, boys, you're all going to war." And it was hooting and hollering and hoorahs, and yeah, we're ready to go. And the plan was that we were going to, the only tanks on there was we had heavy equipment. We got a lot of engineers' equipment in there, dozers and that sort of stuff. A blade, I grew up in that business. I was real impressed with the amount of heavy equipment you could get inside the well deck of a T. And then there was 2 tanks, and we were the last vehicles on that ship, excuse me, my father, I said ship. And the plan was, and was in fact right on the money, we were to land at 6:10 a.m. in the morning on the beach at Chulai, south of the airport. In fact, we didn't know there was an airport there, but we landed down on the beach at Chulai, and that first boat hit it right at 6:10 in the morning, and 2 tanks got off. One went south, that was Sergeant Carlson's tank, 3-man crew. Corporal Vickery, our tank, we went to the north end of the beach there. We set up, the infantry come in, moved out, moved across, and the battle was on.
Yeah.
It was all small arms. That's what we listened to, all small arms. And we were down at the north end of the beach probably 3.5 hours. And we got a radio communication that we were to go back down to the landing area. We're going to get some directions for our next move. We come down there. You know the weather. You know the weather in August in Vietnam. We all climbed out of the tank, sitting on the fenders, and I'm sitting there, and this captain tells us that what we're going to do is these 5 Amtraks you see over here to your left. You 2 tanks are going to escort those 5 Amtraks full of sea rations and water to our infantry troops. And you are to go south 300 yards. There'll be somebody down there who will give you directions. You are then to turn west, and you will ultimately come into a little headquarters area we're setting up there, a little gathering area. But you're behind the lines. It'll be nice and safe, and there'll be somebody there to give you direction all the way along. So, great. We climbed up in the tank. I sit down in the gunner seat, and we start to roll, and we go about, we don't go 25 feet, and I mic up and say, Corporal Vickery, didn't that captain tell us we're supposed to be going south? He says, yeah, we are. I says, well, you know we're going north. And he said, yeah, but Sergeant Carlson must know what he's doing. Okay. We rolled to the north end of the beach, and by that point, the beach wasn't 200 foot from the jungle edge. We rolled up, and within about 100, 150 yards of the end where the beach come back in around tight into that jungle, we turned left, and in about somewhere between 25 and 50 feet into that jungle, we were now beyond our infantry lines. In 3 hours, we hadn't gotten 50 feet into the jungle. We rolled for an eternal period of time, and I have no idea, and I'm guessing 45 minutes, maybe an hour. And I'm the rear tank. I've got that gun over the back of the bustle, or back of the engine compartment, and I'm back there, and we're taking small arms fire, and we're taking 200 rounds a minute.
Could you fire back?
I could, but I knew I didn't have a lot of ammo, and I'm also I've got the engine compartment, so the only fire I could undertake was I would take a bit of time, and I would move over and get to where I could get the gun down a bit, and I would just sit there and wait for muzzle flash, and it probably took me 15 minutes, 20 minutes before I was truly good at it, maybe a little less than that, but I got to where if I saw muzzle flash within 15 feet of where my sights were, I could get on that in a second and a half, and the muzzle flash just quit.
Wow.
I mean, it was.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, I'm getting red now. I'm back there now. I was the most scared human being on the planet back there, because I'm looking into the dark. All of y'all been in the jungle. You can't read a newspaper at 12 a.m. or 12 in the afternoon in the jungle. You can't read nothing, and it was us terrified. And then a few minutes go by, and I'm just getting so good at getting on those muzzle flashes and getting to where when I got on them, I wasn't getting any more fire out of them. And they were, and these were all automatic weapons. I'm only looking at automatic weapons. If I get a burst, I'm going after the bursts. And so we continue to roll, and there's this point where I get so good at that I say to myself, John Wayne. In fact, people who knew me in the hospital heard this story. John Wayne, I'll bet you wish you were here with me right now. And we kept rolling, and at a point that I would say is probably somewhere between 45 minutes and an hour, Corporal Vickery says, "It looks like we're coming to a clearing." And I say, "Okay." I said, I mic up and I say, "Corporal Vickery, what do we got?" And he says, "We're coming into a rice paddy." And I said, "When we get out there where we got some daylight, let me come around and have a look." And he said, "No, you stay over the back." And I said, "Corporal Vickery, I've been staring in the dark for hours now."
Yeah.
With my words, for hours now. Let me get my bearings. Let me see where the other vehicles are. And he says, "Okay, you come around. I'll tell you when. And when you come around, you don't quit cranking on that gun till you get back over the back." And I said, "Got it." And about the time we clear the jungle, we're probably a few feet out, and now I got room to get the gun around. I spin around and I come around, and I've been over the back. I come around now, and when I'm square out in front of me, about 25, maybe 30 yards approximately, we're talking, it's been a while since, been like 51 years if I'm not mistaken. But as I come across, there's an Amtrak right in front of us that stopped. And as my gun just clears that, now I'm looking diagonally up this rice paddy that's probably 250 yards, best recollection, long, and maybe 150 wide. And out there, I see from the rice paddy, I see a gunfire, hear it make contact. I hear the impact, what's the word, that report. I hear the contact report. And I yell, "Oh shit, we're next." Now, I wasn't the smartest Marine, but I knew enough to know you take the front, you take the back, and you own them.
Yeah.
I cranked that gun around to get around the back, and once I got right back around the back, we took a hit from one of those. I thought they were 76 millimeters. I read an article, somebody wrote an article about the lost column, and they said they were like 87 millimeter guns. I didn't know.
I don't think they're that big. I found two casings that were that I thought were 75, but they could have been 76.
Yeah, they're 76s. Yeah. Okay, so 70. That's what I'd always thought they were. Anyway, they're 76s. But as I get over the back, wham! The turret is full of metal, full of fire, full of smoke, and my tank commander yells, "I've been hit! I've been hit!" And what had happened is his TC's hatch was up behind him, and he was down inside of that, hunched down pretty well, and it protected him for the most part. He'd been up he'd had his head above the top of the turret, not a lot, but he was up to where he could see all the while we're in the jungle. I was impressed. But he was up high enough that when that one of those 76s hit that hatch, and it come through and hit him in the back of the shoulder, and it split there, and a bunch of it went through here and broke both those bones in his arm, and it took out that in his face. Greg Aguirre met him in the hospital, saw him later. So anyway, he yelled, we're hit, abandoned tank." And he was gone. And so he went over the bustle and down on, he landed on the front, in front of the driver, skidded down. I said, "Peterson, did Corporal Vickery just go by you?" And he said, "Yeah, he did." And I said, "Well, I'll tell you what, if he tries to get back up in here, you let me know, because I'm closing that hatch." I got up, closed the hatch, and
I think I saw that tank. That I saw a tank going into that CP area with a hole blown into that hatch.
Well,
that might have been that.
Yeah, and it had a whole bunch of holes in a turret ring, but Vickery's gone. Once he's gone, I spin back around. In fact, before I spin around, I'm looking out my hatch, my gunner's hatch, and I'm looking, or my periscope, and there's a guy that's from here to that wall, maybe, yeah, from here to the other side of that room there. He's under 50 feet from me, and what there is, and we're under 50 feet off the left edge of the jungle and 10 yards out of the jungle, and the entire convoy is along this left edge up in front of us, these Amtraks, and they're getting whacked. They're getting whacked, and they're getting whacked, and they're getting whacked, and now I'm seeing everything's on fire up there. But, you know, I left something out too. Let's see, before Vickery gets hit, and this is important. I didn't used to tell this story. I scrubbed it. I didn't tell it. I certainly don't tell it to civilians. When we rolled out, and as I come around, I say that as I just clear that Amtrak in front of me, as I just clear that, I said I hear the 76 fire, see it fire, hear the report. That hit the lead tanks, Sergeant Carlson's tank, and it hit the driver's periscope, right side periscope, and it drove it down. It hit his driver on the back side of the right hand, and it broke a couple of bones and cut him up. And I didn't know that until later, but I knew something had been hit up there, and there's a clear assumption it was lead tank. But then, almost immediately, Vickery gets hit. He's out. As I'm coming back around to get onto the rice paddy and see what I can do, see what my next targets are going to be, I see a tank coming back down through the rice paddy. I'm looking, and I asked my driver, Peterson, is that Carlson's tank? And he said, yeah, it is. I said, is he coming back to maybe give us what's he doing here? And he said, I don't know. And now I get to where I put my gun on him and I'm watching him. And he drives right out of that rice paddy and right through the jungle, and ultimately his excuse was that he couldn't get radio communication, so he thought he would drive back to where he could tell somebody what was going on. That was his story. That was Sergeant Carlson, Coffee Cup Carlson, whose name shall... Oh, man. So anyway, forgive me. So Carlson leaves. Now we got one tank, and we got 5 Amtraks. They are full of sea rations and water. They've got crews, and my guess is the crew, I think I estimated a typical 3-man crew in an Amtrak. Right. And so there are, I think I count that when we went into that, there were 37 guys, 37 Marines in those convoys. And when it's all said and done, there's only going to be 2 of us come out of there. Oh my gosh! And that take out three that hightailed out of there. But I spend the next several minutes trying to get my gun down low enough that I can shoot into. There's two gun positions, 2 spider traps, and one of them is 50 yards from my tank, and one of them is 75, a little farther up in the middle towards the middle of the rice paddy. And along the jungle's edge, this is perfect. Can you follow me on this one? From here down on a 360-degree perimeter of that rice paddy, you couldn't see the jungle for the black pajamas. We had rolled out into a approximately 2,500-man Viet Cong unit, well-trained, well-armed, and the reason for that assault at the time and location was that they had discovered that unit of Viet Cong were going to attack Lady Bird Johnson's construction project that wasn't but about 300, 400, 500 yards off into the jungle from this operation. BRJ, Brown, Root, and Johnson, was building a concrete B-50. They were building the runway of a B-52 runway base out there in the jungle, out in July, in the jungle and I don't think they ever flew any B-52s into there,
gosh.
but somebody had a real nice, I'm in the construction business. Somebody got a real nice plum contract to do some work in there, but that's what was going to happen. They were going to attack. I don't think there were a lot of Marines in garrison. I think there was an airstrip with 5 A-1E Sky Raiders, metal mat runway, and there was a security unit of Marines, and I think it wasn't much bigger than the platoon. I think.
Yeah.
That was at that runway, and that was all that was there. But in any case, that's what was about to happen. We screwed their plans up, but we rolled in, and like I say, now I didn't have a lot of ammo to get in. Now I've got a couple hundred rounds, maybe, when I spend 6-8 minutes trying to get the gun down, and I couldn't get down on the guns. And so now I'm trying to get down in the jungle, and at 100 yards, I could hardly get the gun down enough to shoot somebody that's 5 foot maybe. But I did what I could, burned up all of my 30 cal, made sure that I moved far enough out to where I could get the gun down and take guys out of here. But in probably 4 minutes, 5 minutes, I don't have any 30 cal. So now I'm just sitting in there, and my driver's sitting in there, and he's locked in, I'm locked in, and we're just sitting there, and we're taking fire into the turret ring. And we probably took 5 hits. We probably got hit 15 times over the course of 15, 20 minutes, and 5, maybe 6 of those hit the turret ring and made penetrations. And I've learned that the term for what I got was backspall. A good friend of mine told me that that's not just pepper shrapnel, as I've always called it. It's backspall, but I describe it as being in one of those old, us kids born in the 40s and the 50s, remember the old single-use flash bulb that you'd put in and go, smile, floosh, and it was like being in one of those. Inside that flash bulb, I was burned. I was blistered, burned red. I didn't have anything that was exposed that had hair on it didn't have hair on it anymore. And I'm just sitting there, and there isn't anything I can do. I got no ammo. And that goes on for a bit. And now I smell something and feel something that just scares the crap out of me. I got a fire on the batteries. And I'm sitting next to, and I got 360 gallons. It's important to say, I've got 360 gallons of napalm right beside me. I never lit that up, because those take out 6 tankers, and that leaves 31 Marines. Those 31 Marines were running around out in that rice paddy, and they were everywhere. And I wasn't going to light up. Maybe I should have, but I wasn't going to light up with those Marines out there in the rice paddy.
Didn't know where they were.
Yeah, I mean, I could see where they were and they weren't, but I didn't want to take a risk. Yeah. It was obvious based on what I could see right now, we weren't going to live anyway, and I didn't want to do anything to shorten anybody else's life out there. So we sat there, and we were there maybe 10 minutes, maybe a little more, and that seems like hours. And so it's hard to actually calculate. But then I got the battery on the fire on the batteries, and I said, Peterson, I'm getting out. I'm coming over the front. So I turned the turret around to where the tank commander's hatch was over the bow, and jumped down, got down in front of the tank, and got down there and looked around, and I could see less than 50 feet from me, there's this guy with that 3.5 rocket launcher, and he's shooting up at the Amtracs, and then he'd take around and whack the side of the turret, and I just had to stay out from that rocket when it went off, when that projectile went off up in the air. I had to stay out of the way of the shrapnel from that. But I wasn't taking any small arms fire when I was under there for the first 30 seconds, 45 seconds or so. But I just thought, can't do anything here. I'm not getting out of here probably. And I got 19 rounds of ammo. So I moved around to the right side of the tank and scurried down about mid track, leaned up against one of the roller wheels, pulled my knees up, and began shooting at that 76 millimeter gun. They somehow they had some way to probably scissor lift of some sort, but they get the gun up high enough to shoot. One guy'd aim it and the other guy'd fire it, and they'd come up, and when they'd come up, bam, bam. I burned up 12 rounds, and I don't know if I hit within 3 yards of any of those guys, and I'm an expert marksman, but I'm firing a pistol that had been handed to me the day I went aboard that ship. And so I have no idea where it was hitting. So I burned up 12 rounds, and as I'm there, and I'm going to burn up all of them. I'm going to keep trying. What the heck? And as I'm sitting there, now fortunately I can't breathe through my nose. Never have been able to. So I got to open my mouth to suck air, and I was sucking an immense amount of air that day. And I fired around there, then kind of leaned back up to try and get a good position, and I'm blam, and I take a round that hits me right there and comes out my mouth, which fortunately was open, and takes out half my teeth, blows the back of my head out of my mouth. Wow, what was, holy crap. And I kind of turn around and look, and when we had rolled out of the jungle, we were about 10 yards out in the rice paddy. We'd rolled right over the top of a trench, and there's five guys in that trench. I saw the first one was an M1. I saw an M1 carbine, an M1 carbine, and a Thompson submachine gun was on the end, and he had plenty of room. And when I got around that side of the tank, I was taking a lot of small arms fire, but I wasn't getting hit by it. And I didn't know where it was coming. It seemed like it was coming from everywhere. I don't think before I got hit, there was probably anybody down in there shooting, because I wasn't 10 yards from them, and I don't care who you are with a 45, you're going to hit somebody. But they hit me, and as I turn and look at them, I see them. I spin around and start to scoot, and I got to go from me to you to get back out around the front of the tank. And I take 3 bullets in the back, 1 in the butt. I take 1 in this leg. I take 1 that hits me up here, and the one that hits me in the back of the Achilles tendon, pushes it to the side, tracks around, takes everything off the side of this foot. I get 1 that goes down and in between these 2 bones in my toe and sticks in the sole of my boot. 1 that sticks in the sole of my boot here that doesn't hit me, and those were 45 rounds. Those were 45 rounds, and 3 of them hit that right foot, and 1 hits the left foot as I'm scurrying around. I get back around the front, and I honestly thought they'd hit the sole of my boot going around, because I didn't feel any pain. Wow. It was a hell of a jerk, but I just felt a jerk and didn't feel any pain. Now I'm back around front of the tank. I'm looking around. I got 7 rounds left, and I'm squirting blood. I can feel that it's squirting. It's arterial bleeding in my back. This is squirting arm's length out of here. So, okay, this is it. And I took my pistol down on my hands and knees. I looked around and said, God, if there is a God, I don't know you and you don't know me, but you know my mother, and she prays to you every day for my safety. For my mother's sake, don't leave my body in this rice paddy. Get my body home to Mom. Okay, let's do it. And I was going to go out to these guys, this closest, 76. And I thought, okay, let's get ready. Let's see what this guy's doing around here. And this guy over here with a 3.5, he whacks the turret, rocket goes off, explodes. And I think, you know what? I said, my driver's still in there. So I pause for a second, wait. He goes down in the ground, down in this trench. They come up after a moment. And this time, he's looking at me hiding underneath the front of that track. And so I think, well, let's see what we can do here. And I lean out and I lean out and I lean out and I see that finger twitch. And I just lean back and in in a third or quarter of a second, I lean back and that rocket hits in the mud about where my jacket is, skips off 5 feet, and it goes off. And I have an old what's-her-name, the mother of my children, wouldn't even give me that back when she divorced me. But I had a piece of shrapnel that is the size of my finger that laid right up there for the next 2 weeks till they got it out in Okinawa. But wow, you shouldn't have done that. They went down in the hole. When they come up, I was standing there and I shot both of them. I was going to shoot him in the head. The gunner got shot in the head, but that was after I shot the loader, and that was from me to you, running when I shot him, aiming at his head, and I hit him in the shoulder, and it literally separated his shoulder, and I figured, well, he ain't gonna do nothing, I ain't got any rounds to waste. And from about that far away, I shot the gunner in the head, went back to the front of the tank, waited, the 76 come up, fired around up convoy, and as soon as they went down, I started running, and I ran down on them, and there were 2 guys in there, and as soon as I got on them, they're getting ready to start coming back up. They looked up at me, and I shot them from about that far in the head. Didn't get down, just leaned down in there, shot them. Come back to the tank, waited a bit. The 3 guys out there and the 76 out in the middle, I knew that was going to be the end of it. And I before I left, after saying my prayer and deciding what I was going to do, I did have the thought that I said, okay, and God, let's hope the next round is a kill shot. I don't want to be laying on the ground and watch somebody cap me. And don't hit me into Johnson. That's it. Went off and did my thing. But they were so well armed. They had M1s, M1 carbines. They had Thompson submachine guns. They had 3.5 rocket launchers. I didn't see, other than the Chinese-made AT guns, I didn't see a weapon that wasn't an American weapon in that convoy, fresh out of Cosmoline, gifted to them by the French. Shiploads, they had several shiploads of guns, and they were all brand new, and they had all kinds of ammo. But some of the stuff they had, I don't know what their machine guns were. Their machine guns, I don't know what they were because I didn't get a look at any of them. All I saw was muzzle flashes and heard run, but they were tracered. And the way I tell the story, you couldn't tell it 15 years ago, but nowadays you go into a grocery store, you're standing there at checkout, and down there's that little screen down there, and there's all them laser lights. Well, that's what that rice paddy looked like. Tracers going everywhere. Firing's going on. I'm convinced they're in the Marine firing back. There ain't anybody to fire back. And they're just shooting each other. Okay, good. So I just said, okay, it's time to go. I run out there. I shoot those 3 guys out there. Same drill. Wait till they go down and run out there. And they were already up when I got there. But they hadn't fired it, and they were still trying to aim it, and I shot them. I can remember all those faces. I can remember every one of those faces. Well, I see them in heaven. but I can remember what they look like. And I run back to the tank, and as I'm running back to the tank, I can't believe I did this. Doggone it. When I got out of the tank, what I forgot to say was that when I got out of the tank and climbed down and got in front, there underneath the front of the tank, the bow of the tank, Corporal Vickery was there. I've told the story a million times, I never forget that. But Vickery was there on his hands and knees. And he's going, Hearne, I'm hit. Hearne, I'm hit. And my reaction was, Corporal Vickery, that's the least of your worries. We got bigger problems than that. Oh, Hearne, I'm hit. And I said, okay. And I went around and did my stuff. Well, when I come back from that 76 out in the towards the middle of the rice paddy, as I come back, I notice that one of the Amtraks had turned around from up frontward in the convoy, had turned around and was probably 45 yards from us, not far off the convoy, but facing back at us, and it was stopped and the engine compartment was on fire, and I couldn't see under it. And when I come running back, I decided that's as far away as I can get from them, and I can't see under there. I got back and I got down on my knees and I couldn't talk, couldn't mouth anything. He didn't get it. I drug him. He didn't have to get drugged far. I kept pointing. He got it, and we ran over and climbed underneath a burning Amtrak. Burrowed in under the front of the Amtrak. Got back up under there. Moved a bunch of mud around. There was only about that much freeboard. Got back under there. I went back up towards the front and did my best to conceal our entry point there. We moved back in there, and I'll call that 11-ish by the time this is done, maybe a little earlier. We laid there until probably in the 3 o'clock range, maybe longer. We laid there for a great portion of the day, and the firing never slowed down, never picked up, never ceased. The firing continued as it had from the first round they fired on that rice paddy until for hours and hours and hours. There then comes a point, probably mid-afternoon, 3 o'clock-ish, I'd guess, and over all the fire, I can hear a voice yelling. I can hear a human voice in there, in the mix of it. And I hear it yelling. And then there's a little subsidence over, okay, so this is a rice paddy and I'm back there, and over in here I can hear a little bit of a subsidence. And then I hear more, and then I hear this voice louder over the lessening of the fire. And over the course of about a minute and a half, they've all heard the command. It's obviously ceasefire. And nothing goes on for a few minutes. We're trying to see what's going on out there. And then they start coming out into the rice paddy, black pajama, barefooted Viet Cong. There's probably 200 of them now out into the rice paddy, and they're going through the Amtraks, and the Marines that are on the ground, they're stripping their clothes and they're stripping their gear, and they're taking everything they can get. And 3 of them, I see 3 of them come close to the front of my Amtrak, and the bow of the Amtrak was cracked about that, was down, the ramp was about that, not the bow, but the ramp was down about that far at the top. And I think we're probably talking about 10 foot in the air. Is that about right for an Amtrak? Maybe a little more. But 10 foot in the air, and hanging over that, bent at the waist, was a dead Marine. And these 3 guys come up, and now all I can see is feet. And one guy sets himself up over here, and the other 2 are facing this, and it's obvious this guy's the boss. These 2 are the worker bees, and the 2 worker bees take turns trying to jump up there and get that Marine. Never accomplish it, and this goes on for a minute, maybe, something like that. Weeks, it felt like. But that goes on for a bit. They don't get it. And then all of a sudden, and this is hard to do sitting here, but then all of a sudden, I see the 2 feet of the boss man their leader. I see him, he is now standing that far from the front of that ramp, about 2/3 of the way across that, and I know he ain't looking at the front of that ramp. And I'm proved right, he's doing this. And then he moves around a little bit, then he steps back about a yard or so back. He's still facing that ramp, and I bang Vickery. Vickery's watching. And I'm laying there, I've got 2 fingers in here, I've got my thumb in here, and I'm watching this like this in mud. Vickery's doing the same thing the other side. He's almost got his fist up in the side of his head, and he's doing the same thing. And I then see these 2 feet, here's the front of the ramp, I see these 2 feet do this. I see the break of the ankles. I see the bend coming down. I see the canvas strap. I see the pistol grip of the Thompson. I see the Thompson down on the ground, then a knee, and he apparently realizes that he can't do this real well, so he sets the Thompson aside, gets down, literally he lays on his left side, grabs that Thompson, and he looks under there, and he does this. Gets up and runs away. Gives an order and runs away. Vickery didn't blink. I didn't blink. I don't think my face looked like I was alive. My guess is he just said, I'm not wasting any ammo. The only thing I can assume, because it wasn't that he didn't see us under there. It was dark under there. But when somebody's looking you in the eye. And he got up and he ran off. And so we laid there, and we laid there all night long. Wasn't much going on. We could hear a hell of a battle going on all around us, but it wasn't in our rice paddy. Hell of a battle going on. We listened to it, and it went on all night long. Sometime I would guess well into the morning, a helicopter comes in, a gunship comes in over, we come in off that edge, this helicopter, now we're right out here, that helicopter comes in right off that edge, comes in, a couple of skips, comes to a stop. They sit there for a moment, I can see the guys looking around, and blam, it takes a hit. And when it does, that helicopter shakes and goes up and flips upside down out into the jungle. And I think, well, we're mic'd, so I think, well, that's it. I thought we were dead anyway. Can't get any deader. That just sucks. Too bad for the helicopter crew. So, well, that's it. If there was ever a chance, that was it. We were thinking this. We never spoke a word under there. And so about 30 minutes later, maybe a little more, we look at each other. We hear jets. Squadron of A-1E Sky Raiders. They come in. And they're packing napalm and 250-pound bombs, and they strafe the edges of that jungle. I mean, it was impressive. It was impressive. It was loud. The heat off that napalm was just barely bearable underneath there. It was incredible what they laid down, and we're I don't think either one of us grinned, but we were thinking a grin. We're thinking, well, maybe we're going to get out of here. Maybe we're going to get out of here. Yeah. And half hour goes by, another helicopter comes in, another gunship comes in. And he comes in about an identical location. As he starts to come in, he starts to take gunfire, just like it had been before. He's off and gone. Half hour later, maybe a little more, I hear a whole bunch of helicopters. And I'm about to be shown what a helicopter can do. I had no idea. We'd operated with them, at Pendleton. I had no idea what a helicopter could do. But 5 helicopters set up over us and started laying down fire. And they had rockets, but they were little bitty rockets. I don't know, they couldn't have been bigger than a 20 millimeter. And they didn't have a lot of them, but they'd fire a few rockets, but they just laid down they had more ammo than we did in their guns. And they just laid down the fire, and the helicopter come back in from the same spot, come in, bounce, bounce, bounce. And somebody had seen us, because one thing I had done was probably when I want to say it was, I recall it as when that first helicopter come down, I kind of scrooched up as best I could, and I'm from here to there, to the front, and I went like this. And I didn't want to give my position away, so if they didn't see me there, oh well, that was it. I just did that, pulled back and went here, and they must have seen us had to have seen us, because when that last helicopter come in, they come in, same location, that corner, moved over here. One door gunner jumped out, set about grabbing, dragging Marines, dead Marines from the rice paddy back over to the tank. The other one came right to the front of that Amtrak. And Vickery had kind of slithered up to where he could be reached, and he got out, and they pulled him out and led him over, and the 2 loaders threw him up in the helicopter. He jumped up into one of the seats. Then they come back, and I couldn't move at all. I was done. I had no move in me. And one of those door gunners got on his belly, crawled down there, got my arm, and pulled me to where they could both get a hand on me, and they drug me out of there. And, I tell this story a lot, but I can't remember ever feeling what happened like I am now. Maybe I don't know why, but it isn't the cameras, it isn't the mic. It's just I'm talking to some Marines here who've been there and done that. But they drugged me out. Took 2 of them to get me up on one shoulder, and they took me over there. And there were 5 Marine dead bodies on the bottom of that gunship, and they threw me on top of that on my back. Jumped up in that helicopter, and they said, "Let's get her in the air." And then they were having a hell of a time getting that helicopter with 6 extra Marines up in there. Well, actually, there were 7, because Vickery and me and 5 bodies on the ground. It was a hard liftoff for them. And when we get to about 300-400 feet elevation and up over the canopy, now we start taking rounds to the bottom of that helicopter, and I'm laying there, I can hear it going through that titanium skin. Thwack, thwack, thwack. And I say to myself, God, this is wrong. You got me this far, and now I'm going down in a burning helicopter. And a few moments go by, and we quit taking rounds, and off to Charlie Med in Chu Lai I go. They do a quick look at me, and they say, "Move him over there." They triage a bunch of guys, do a bunch of stuff. I lay there about 8 hours, and finally they say, "Well, what are we going to do with him?" Put him on a plane. They put me on probably a 123, because it was on that metal mat. I don't think I'd flown the 130s off there, but a 123, and flew me to down to Da Nang. So I was at Charlie Med. They took me to Bravo Med, B Med, which was Da Nang. I was there for a night, and it was the same deal. I went down to the Air Force base, the big one, and I can't remember the name of it.
Tansanut?
I went down to Tansanut.
Yeah.
And spent a night there. They loaded me on a C-130, flew me to not Yokosuka, but to the Navy base on the Philippines, to Subic Bay, flew me to Subic Bay Hospital there, and it was the first time they did it, but it happened a couple of times. Once it got there, they kind of put me off to the side, kept me in a closet because they were triaging, and they weren't going to mess with anybody who wasn't going to live. And I probably weighed 123 pounds, 6'1", 123 pounds average weight those days when I landed on that beach. And I was under 100 pounds, well under 100 pounds when I got there, and didn't look too good. Didn't feel, and I didn't feel bad. There was no pain from any of the stuff, any of the wounds. Didn't hurt at all. Just so much damage done by the impact of them. But I was there for 3 days. Finally, the second day they put me to bed. Stayed there 2 days. Then I went to Yokosuka, Japan. They took me off of one plane, put me in another, flew me to Okinawa, trucked me up to Camp Cooey Army Hospital. I spent 4 months in Camp Cooey Army Hospital, and that sucked worse than getting shot. They treated me terribly. It's a fact. They treated me terribly. But I was the only Marine in Camp Cooey Army Hospital on the open wounds ward for 3.5 of my 4 months there. And then one day, a young redhead corporal machine gunner come in, a guy by the name of Ray Winkleman, and Ray Winkleman had been shot with 1 bullet, and he had 2 entries and 2 exits. In this cheek, out that cheek, in this cheek, and out that cheek. So I felt like, okay, my stuff ain't so bad. If you could get me in a position, I might be able to sit down, but Ray couldn't. But when I was there those 4 months, I had been an E1 when I landed on Starlight. 15 months in the Marine Corps, I'd been an E1. I'd been there about maybe a month. I don't think a month, and I got PFC. Then a colonel came in and gave me Lance Corporal about a month later. And then 2-3 weeks later, another colonel came in and gave me my corporal stripes, gave me my corporal chevrons, shook my hand, thanked me, and said, "Get me out of here." I said, "Well, we'll do what we can. We don't have much room out there." So, okay, but so I went from private to corporal in just over 3 months. Yeah. And so a great part of the whole story is that when I finally got out, after 4 months there, when I reached the point where I was good in a wheelchair and had been in it long enough and done a little bit of moving around, okay, they figured, okay, let's put him on crutches. And I was on crutches for a couple of days, and they said, okay, he's okay. He's probably going to be okay. You're on crutches. The next day, they took me to Camp Hansen, to the Casualty Company, which is a transitional unit for combatants who are coming out of some kind of physical issues. Where some guys just had surgery, some guys have wound issues, but it's that transitional period before you go back to wherever you're going next. And Top Sergeant Fox, anybody know Top Fox? Top Fox, when we went in country, Top had been our first sergeant, B Company first when we went in.
Right, when I was there too.
Yeah, well, he stayed in Okinawa. Was he in country with you? He wasn't in country with you.
The only time I knew him is when he at B Company first.
Okay, yeah,
Camp
okay.
Pendleton.
Yeah, okay. Well, he was old and had bad feet and was getting kind of short, and he was the I guess we'll call him, he was the unit commander of this casualty company there at Camp Hansen, right at the tank barracks. And I walked in there, and he said, "Private Hearne," gave me a big hug, and I gave him a big hug, and we spent 2 days talking. At the end of the second day, he told me what had happened in the 4 months I'd been out of country, and I told him what happened on the 1 day I'd been in country. We shared. I got to know a lot about a man that I didn't know well and had high regard for, but I got to learn a lot about him. Towards the back end of the second day, he says, "Make sure you get your stuff ready." He says, "We're probably going to get you sent back to the States tomorrow." And I said, No, Top, I don't want to go back. I got to go back. I got some time left on my tour. I want to go back. He said, why would you want to go back? And I said, Top, they tried and proved to me they can't kill me, and I've lost a lot of buddies in there. I want to go back. He said, I don't think we can do that. I said, Top, if he was alive today, he'd tell you this is the truth, because it is. I said, Top, Sergeant, what general in this man's Marine Corps don't you know by first name? You can do it for me, can't you? Please try. Well, I don't think I have much success, but let me try. Next day at 2 o'clock, I went down to Kadena and flew back into July, Vietnam, and lived the life on the beach. And I'm so angry that I didn't even think about it. They're probably in my storage unit over in Eastern Washington. I have a book of those years, those months and months I spent on the beach. It was like living in Hawaii on the beach of Chu Lai, Vietnam. We'd go out and we'd set up positions out on Highway 1 and out on mountains. And I spent most of my time doing security at the airport between the ramp and the ocean. That was cool. Yeah. And, I did not, from the time I got back, I didn't get into but one conflict, and that was running a bunch of trucks. We were doing security over a bunch of trucks that had supplies of some sort, and we're running up Highway 1, and we come to a village, and the villagers were well armed, and we had about a 45-minute battle with them and worked our way through that, and then come back the next day. But I was the only combat, only time I fired any of my guns when I got back. I also when I got back in, let's see, I guess I finished that tour, extended, and when I come back, I think I was still 19 years old, got back to Camp Pendleton and got my E5s. Got my E5 chevrons back in.
You got pretty quick after spending a long time as a private.
Well, Aguirre, Greg, it is Aguirre. Greg Aguirre. I could never and I didn't know until a few months ago, I think it is. I'd never known why that happened. I mean, I'd worked hard to stay a private, but Aguirre was back on leave, and he heard that Corporal Vickery was at Great Lakes Naval Air Station, so he went to visit him. And so and I tell you, when I heard all of that, when we were in Washington D.C., Jenny and I are sitting on the bus, and there's a guy behind us comes up and leans around and says, "Hearne, you Private Hearne?" I says, "Well, it was." He says, "You know Vickery, Corporal Vickery?" He says, "Well, I knew him as Gunnery Sergeant Vickery, but yeah, wow. Vickery." Yeah, I said, we chatted for a minute. I said, did he tell you the story? And he said, "Oh yeah." And I said, I dated this gal for a long time. We've been married a couple of years now. She knew me before that. There are a lot of people heard this story, and she's heard it several times. But it's a remarkable and probably to many an unbelievable story. Would you share what Vickery told you? And he told Ginny and me verbatim about me, what I'd done to Ginny, verbatim. We get to the end of the story. He gets to the end of the story as he's thinking about it. And I said, "Did he tell you about the Viet Cong?" And he says, "The 3 Viet Cong that come up to the front of the Amtrak?" I says, "Yeah." I said, "What did he tell you?" And he told the story. You ask him. Vickery and Great Lakes Naval Air Station told him that story verbatim.
Wow.
And he said Vickery looked pretty crappy. I didn't think Vickery would. I'd never heard about him. I didn't see him, hear him. Once I went back in country, I just assumed he'd gotten out, and because you lose that much of your face. Yeah. And apparently he went on to be, I think Vickery was he's either certainly gunnery sergeant, maybe a first sergeant, but he went back in. But I'd have given anything to chat it with him. But that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
You guys are phenomenal. just to watch you and see how you remembered and, your emotions,
I don't usually,
from here.
cry, but like I say, the difference is, you guys sitting here, you guys smell the gunpowder.
Yeah,
You guys feel the heat. You're in that soggy, crappy bog of a rice paddy that I'm in, that I'm mucking around in. And it's easier to get back there.
yeah,
It's a lot easier to get back there and get right down in that, get right back under that Amtrak.
yeah. Wow. Well, I appreciate very much, guys, the stories, and